Welcome to the Keep It Real podcast. I am your host, John West, aka Dead Op, and today is going to be a little bit different. If you've been tuning into the podcast recently, you will notice that my compadre, Mr. Hassan Bridges, is not here today. He overslept, apparently, according to the text messages he sent me, and so we're going to be going solo dolo on this one. We're going to try and talk about some sports, get some points out that I had over the weekend watching some of the games in the NFL and in the NCAA that I would like to get out, regardless of not being able to debate it with my friend. And that's, a little bit unfortunate because I do want the show to be centered more around debate. I feel like debate is more interesting to watch, at least for me. That's what I tend to watch when I watch sports shows. But I feel like having a show by myself, it can have its place, and hopefully it's not too often, but we'll see what happens throughout the weeks. Hopefully he doesn't oversleep all the time. But let's get straight into it. So over the weekend, Lamar Jackson, I believe, separated himself in the MVP discussion. They played the Texans and beat them 41-7, absolutely annihilated the Texans. And we can get into the total team effort in just a little bit, but to emphasize what I wanted to talk about specifically Lamar Jackson and how he is separating himself in the MVP discussion from Russell Wilson and all the other candidates. When you look at what he's doing, I mean, like I said last week, it's spectacular. I mean, I've never seen anything really quite like this. Dude threw for another 222 yards, 4 touchdowns on a 17 of 24 completion percentage, 9.3 yards per attempt. So obviously you can see he's not dinking and dunking. He's not being a casual running quarterback. When you look at the prototypical running quarterback, you think of, oh, he can't throw. No, this man is pushing the ball downfield and constantly testing the defense. And you also look at the fact that he's got 93.3 QBR against the Texans to go along with 9 carries and 86 yards. On the season, however, he's 66.3% completion percentage. That's up from him being in the mid-50s last year, which is phenomenal. I mean, to have that big of a jump, you can tell he's been improving as the season goes on, and he really put in the work over the offseason. I mean, you look at all the storylines in the news, you could see that he was working all offseason, but we didn't quite know what we were going to get. We saw him go out in ugly fashion against the Chargers last offseason, and so to see a jump like this, it gives him an extra boost, I think, in the MVP conversation, even though you could argue that it shouldn't, that should be only for the most improved award when you talk about jump from season to season, but unfortunately it does have weight in the conversation. So you can argue whether that should have relevance, but I'm not going to argue that for this topic because I think that's a whole topic in of itself. But he's also thrown for 2,258 yards, 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, which is pretty good for what was considered a running quarterback, quote unquote. And also he's gone for 788 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns, which, I mean, we already knew what he was going to do from the standpoint of running it coming into this season. So the fact that he's on pace to break Michael Vick's rushing record, I mean, he was on undisputed. Michael Vick was last night, I think, or not last night, but yesterday morning. And he was talking about how he never thought that anybody, especially not Lamar Jackson, would ever be able to break his rushing record for a QB, rushing for the most yards as a QB. And yet here we are. And Lamar Jackson is on pace to break that record. And so that adds historical relevance to his MVP campaign. And when you look at it, I just look at how the Ravens are playing right now. I mean, again, they beat the Texans 41-7. The Texans are a pretty good football team. We've been talking about them also throughout these weeks and how Deshaun Watson has been able to lead the Texans onto what had been a decent season up to this point, but they just came out and smacked them. I mean, from the opening jump, like from the kickoff, you knew that the Ravens were the more dominant team, and that, speaks to how they've constructed their team, but also it speaks to Lamar Jackson. And you just look at the game film also. You look at the game film and you see the first throw even that he threw to, I believe it was Mark Andrews. I mean, or it was either Mark Andrews or Hayden Hurst. I can't exactly remember. I don't have the highlight right in front of me, but he was able to just rifle it in there. I mean, his throwing motion is pure and it's accurate, even though it's a little bit awkward from the standpoint of just the way it looks. I mean, it comes out like a whip, the ball does. So, I mean, as long as it's accurate, I mean, that I'm game. And with his performance this week, you also see that he jumped to second in the league for QBR. He's tied with Dak for second, I think 77.8 QBR, which just further proves that this dude is doing phenomenal things. And I get that people argue with Russell Wilson saying he has less, but let's be real. Lamar Jackson doesn't have the most weapons. People act like he has this explosive offense with weapons all around him. No, he has a decent O-line, a good set of tight ends, and Mark Andrews and Hayden Hurst, who he's comfortable with, who he's formed a chemistry with, which I think jumps and elevates their game even more. So to where you think, oh, these guys are phenomenal, when, yeah, they're pretty good, but I don't think that they're the weapons that some of these other tight ends are in the league. And also, you look at his receivers, outside of Marquise Brown, who's also a very young receiver, and so you have to take into account he's having to create this chemistry as they go along in the season. You look at his other receivers, they're nothing truly special. And so you look at it, I believe that most of the success is due to Lamar and due to his improvement, which just further elevates him in the MVP conversation. And also you have to attribute it to, I believe his name is Greg Roman, the offensive coordinator that they got, who was actually Colin Kaepernick's coach for the 49ers. And so centering that offense around Lamar Jackson has only elevated his play. And so when you look at him compared to Russell Wilson, we talked about it last week. I mean, Russell Wilson has played phenomenally. And I'm not taking anything away from him, because when you tend to argue between two players in the MVP conversation, it looks like you're taking away from one dude and putting more onto another. And I don't want to do that. Russell Wilson is phenomenal. But Lamar Jackson, what he's doing is historical, and you have to give credit where credit is due when it comes to the MVP award. I mean, this is, to me, just a recap or a repeat of history, really, when it comes to Lamar Jackson and his success. I mean, this is what happened when he won the Heisman. Deshaun Watson was phenomenal. And at first, when I was, being a biased Clemson fan, I thought Deshaun Watson should have won the Heisman back then. But now, when I look at what Lamar Jackson was able to do with that Louisville team in elevating their play and taking them to new heights and his historic stats, I realized that he should have won the Heisman. I think it's the same way with this MVP conversation. I believe that Lamar Jackson, he's just doing things that nobody else has done, and he's doing it in a different way. He's revolutionizing the way we think about quarterbacks. We talked about that last week, me and Hassan did, and how you should see a shift in how people draft these days with how Lamar Jackson is playing, because when you looked at how to draft quarterbacks before, you looked at and you said, oh, let me look at all his attributes, his height, his weight, how he looks in the pocket, his throwing motion, when we really should be looking at how good the player played in college and how good is he really based on his talent level. And we look at, the class that Lamar Jackson came out of when it comes to the draft class. Lamar Jackson was by far the most talented quarterback out of all of them. He could do the most things as a football player, but he was drafted last out of all the main quarterbacks because people, wanted to look at others' heights and their completion percentage and all these different stats, and they let it block out and block their sight of how good this man Lamar Jackson is. And so that's why he dropped all the way to the bottom of the first round, and the Ravens were able to pick him up. And honestly, I'm so happy that Lamar Jackson went to the Ravens, because he was able to go into a perfect situation because he went at the bottom of the first round. And so when you look at it, I think teams will start to draft these players that are more talented coming out of college, but might not be the prototypical quarterback. I think you'll see more of those type of quarterbacks drafted due to Lamar Jackson. And also, I think from a player's perspective, the players are going to start to think more of, I want to go to a team that is in a great position rather than going to the highest pick. Because when you go to the highest pick, you're usually going to get in a disastrous situation. Whereas if you go in the bottom of the first round, you may go to a team that may already have a quarterback, and you can grow and learn under the system, and you can get coaches that want you to be there and want you to mold a system around you. And so I feel like the way that Lamar Jackson is changing the league, I think that you just have to look at that and be in awe of that. And I believe that takes him over the top of Russell Wilson, who is having, again, a great season, but we've seen some of the similar seasons to Russell Wilson. He's not doing anything that's truly historic. He's doing things that are great in every category, but just not that historic level. And so I think you have to reward the historic season over somebody who's just playing super, consistent, decent football, if that makes sense. And if you disagree with me, you can go down the comment section and we can have a conversation about it. I try and answer to every comment that I get. And so if you disagree with me, go ahead and comment about it, and we can have a lively debate about it. And, it doesn't need to be an argument. It can be a lively debate. And so before I leave this topic about the Ravens and the Texans, I just want to say that, as a big fan of Deshaun Watson, man, the Texans need to really start to improve that offensive line. I felt like earlier in the season that you could say that the offensive line had improved with the pickup of Laramie Tunsil and the drafting of Titus Howard, I think is his name. They drafted him near the bottom of the first round as a tackle, and I think they moved him around to guard and just moved him around the offensive line. I felt like they had improved, but it looks like they've taken another step back because, Deshaun got sacked another 6 times. That's unacceptable. That's truly unacceptable. And so when you look at it, Deshaun, you can argue that he caused some of those sacks. Excuse me. You can argue that he ran his way into some of those sacks. But you can also say that you can just look at the tape, and you could see, as my roommates come into the room, if you can hear that. But to get back on topic, you could see that Deshaun Watson was getting harassed the entire game. And this was against a Ravens D-line that hadn't gotten a lot of pressure. They're not a D-line that's built to, put a lot of pressure on the quarterback. They're more built to stop the run. And yet he gets sacked 6 times. And so I just feel like they need to improve their offensive line before they become serious contenders. But Deshaun, he also played bad. You look at it, a 9 QBR, 18 of 29 for 169 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 pick, and only a 5.8 yards per attempt. That's unacceptable also from the quarterback position. But I believe he can improve as the season goes on, and he'll bounce back. He's established himself as one of the great young quarterbacks in the league, so I'm not too worried about that. They just need to get him some blockers, man, because, my God, he cannot keep on getting hit like this and be expected to play at the level he's expected to play at. And that's the bottom line. And so that's really all I got to say about the Texans. I mean, it was a disappointing performance because we expected this to be one of the premier games of the season, and it fell flat from that. I mean, the Ravens completely dominated the game from the first snap of the game. And so if you like this video, hit the like button, and also if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button, and also click the notification bell so you never miss an upload or a stream. All right, to move on, I want to talk about, has Tom Brady fallen off the cliff? And we look at it based on how he played this season, but also coming off of this weekend and how he lost to the Eagles 17-10 in a very low-scoring match, and yet I think that Tom Brady has finally fallen off the cliff. And that doesn't mean he can't have any good performances after this. And we've talked about this in previous podcasts, but Brady this season has continued to struggle seriously. And I mean, you could blame it on the offensive line. His offensive line is down from last year. They lost some people to free agency, and also they lost some people to injury this year. And you look at all of that, you can blame it on that. But also, it's disingenuous to say that Tom Brady has not at least decreased in some of his quality of play. It's really a disservice to say that he's the same as he's been all these other years, because he's obviously not. When you watch the Patriots play, I mean, Tom Brady goes 26 of 47 against the Eagles for only 216 yards. He doesn't have any picks, so you do have to give him credit for that, but no touchdowns also. The only touchdown that the Patriots offense was able to score passing the ball came from a wide receiver. They threw it from a wide receiver position. He didn't even throw the touchdown of the game-winning touchdown of the game. And so you look at that to go with, he's only attempting, the ball 4.6 yards per attempt. That means that even when he is throwing the ball and completing it, that means that he is barely getting any yards. He's dinking and dunking, which a lot of people love to bash, and you should, because you have to eventually throw the ball downfield. You have to test the defense, stretch the defense, and put some pressure on them. And he's not doing that. And also, he's only getting a 32.5 QBR. That's not as bad as, let's say, Deshaun was this week. There were some worse quarterbacks playing, but at the same time, that's not up to the standard that a great quarterback plays to, especially at Tom Brady's caliber. And so when you look at that, I almost said the Falcons. If the Patriots are going to win the Super Bowl this year, which is still possible, I'm not saying that that's impossible, but if the Patriots are going to win, again, like we've said in the past, it's going to be because of the New England defense. I mean, this New England defense is completely carrying Tom Brady. They're carrying him at this point. We saw it back in the Super Bowl, but it's become even more true this year. New England against the Eagles held the Eagles to only 265 total yards, 174 passing, and 81 rushing. I mean, that in of itself is phenomenal. But they also got 5 sacks on Carson Wentz. They were able to force a turnover. And when it comes to limiting the passing game, they only allowed 3.9 yards per pass. That's phenomenal. I mean, you can't get much better than that. And that when you look at it, the Eagles didn't score from the beginning of the second quarter on. From that point on, the adjustments that Bill Belichick was able to make completely eliminated anything that the Eagles were trying to do. And so the fact that this game was even close just goes to show you that Tom Brady has fallen off the cliff from his standard. Now, will he be able to play a couple more years? Possibly, but I don't think it's going to happen for New England. I think that Bill Belichick is starting to get tired of having to carry him. And he really is carrying him at this point. I mean, this defense is playing at a historic pace, and yet they're still in close games. And you saw against the Ravens, they can get blown out. So this team can lose even though it has a historic defense. And so when you look at all of that, you have to say Tom Brady has to find a way to improve. Now, he did get N'Keal Harry back, and so that could improve the downfield passing game a little bit. And Philip Dorsett also went out in the fourth quarter with a concussion after catching the only touchdown of the game when it comes to the passing game for the New England Patriots. And so when you look at all of that, there is room for improvement. But at this point, with Tom Brady's age, I don't know how much they can improve, and can they really get to a point where they become a decent offense that can complement that defense. And so when I look at all of that, I just have to say that Tom Brady's not the same. He really isn't. And so I believe that the New England Patriots are at risk of not winning the Super Bowl. Is it possible? Like I said, it is. It's possible that they could win the Super Bowl. But it's not going to be because of Tom Brady. I just want to touch on that real quick because I do still see people arguing for Tom Brady and arguing over whether or not he's fallen off the cliff, and people saying, oh, well, 6 rings, you know, he's still got 6 rings. That has nothing to do with this season. All right. You have to compare to a game-to-game scenario. It's about, this league is about, what have you done for me lately? And just lately, he's not giving me much. And so I have to say that Tom Brady, he's really starting to fall off that cliff, and that's really all that needs to be said. Although I will say about from the Eagles' perspective, man, you have to wonder, should you have gotten rid of Nick Foles? I get that Carson Wentz is a tremendous talent, but he doesn't have the chemistry with their receivers that Nick Foles had. I know that Deshaun Jackson is out, and so that limits your downfield passing game, and also Alshon was out. But when you look at it, they even got one of his receivers, Matthews, back that you thought had a great chemistry with Carson Wentz, and yet they still struggled to get the ball downfield. Really, the only relevant receiver in this game was Ertz, and so they were basically triple covering him. Him and Goddard were getting double and triple covered by the New England defense, and Carson Wentz, he's not making the proper reads. He's not taking the ball. He's not taking his checkdowns to get it to an easier 3rd and 10 or 3rd and 8. He's always trying to get the ball downfield to receivers that can't test the defense downfield. So you have to adjust, and he's not adjusting. He's trying to push the ball downfield, and these receivers are not able to, complement that. And so what ends up happening is you end up getting in situations where you're at 3rd and 15 against a New England defense that doesn't give up a lot of 3rd down conversions. And so you have to wonder, should you have kept Nick Foles, who had a better chemistry with his team, and it looked like the team rallied around him more? And I'm just putting that question out there. I'm not going to touch on it too much because I just wanted to touch on the Tom Brady element of it, but let's watch as the season goes on. Let's watch Carson Wentz, and let's see if he really is the level of player that we thought he could be. And so if you like this video, hit the like button. Also, if you're new to the channel, click the subscribe button. And also, if you're new to the channel, hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload or a stream. Okay, so let's move on to our next topic, which is, I just want to quickly touch on a point that I've been trying to get across for the past 2 or 3 weeks now. And I've had multiple arguments with some people from school and multiple arguments with people in the comment section. If you want to go look back at the Aaron Jones video I did last week touching on the Panthers and the Packers game, you can see in the comment section the long argument I had with somebody over whether Kyle Allen is the QB of the future for the Carolina Panthers. I just want to put this out there. This is the main topic of discussion. The Panthers are going to regret getting rid of Cam because they've pretty much established that they want to get rid of Cam. They placed him on IR, even though it's been touch and go on whether he's really that hurt and if he's really not ready to play, which I'm not going to question whether he's hurt or not. But I also do believe that the Panthers are trying to transition off of him just from the way that the teammates have spoke about him. I did a video about this 2 weeks ago saying that Cam Newton's teammates were turning on him, and I still believe that to this day. All right, you just listen to the way they talk and in conferences and the way they talk on TV shows. It looks like they're trying to transition off of him. And so I believe that the Panthers are going to regret this. And a perfect example of this was the fact that they lost 29-3 to the Falcons. And if you're new to the channel, you'll realize that I am a Panthers fan. I try to be objective though. And I look at the way this team is. Cam Newton would be doing better with this team, with this current roster, than Kyle Allen is. Now, Cam Newton would need to be healthy to do that, because if he can't throw the ball downfield, or 5 yards downfield even, which is where we were at the point last year with his injury, where he couldn't even throw the ball downfield, 5 yards. I mean, obviously, if he's like that, he wouldn't be able to do better. But as long as his shoulder is okay, and his plant foot is healed, he would be doing better than Kyle Allen. You look at Kyle Allen against the Falcons, and we all know that the Falcons have tremendously struggled this year. They're not a good football team. And yet Kyle Allen only threw 31 of 50 for 325 yards, no touchdowns, 4 interceptions. 4. And this is coming off 2 weeks ago against the 49ers where he threw another 3 picks, all right? And when you look at it, 6.5 yards per attempt, which is a big stat to me. You'll see that over the trend of my previous videos and throughout this video and throughout the future if you stick around, that I look at yards per attempt as a key stat. It tells me, are you dinking and dunking or not? And obviously it is, because 6.5 is a very low yards per attempt stat. And that, you could compare that to Lamar Jackson, who has over an 8. And so that is somebody who pushes the ball downfield. You can also look at Dak's yards per attempt, and you can see he doesn't dink and dunk. And so Kyle Allen, he's dinking and dunking, and yet he's throwing all these interceptions. He's only got a 7.3 QBR against the Falcons. The Falcons have a terrible defense, at least up to this point. I mean, they had a resurgence against the Saints, but for the rest of the season, they looked like they were a dumpster fire. And yet he got sacked 5 times on top of that. And when you look at that, those just aren't winning QB stats. That's not your franchise quarterback. I've been saying this entire time that Kyle Allen is not a franchise quarterback. He's not the worst quarterback in the world, but he's not going to take you where you want to be with your franchise, which is a Super Bowl. Every single franchise, their ultimate goal is to win a Super Bowl. I don't care who you are. You could be the Browns, who have been a disaster for years, and yet their ultimate goal is to get to the Super Bowl and win it. And Kyle Allen is not that dude. He's a good backup quarterback, but that's it. He's not going to be a star quarterback in this league. No matter what people tell me, I'm always going to believe that. And when you look at it, people tried to say, well, Cam was inaccurate. Cam was trash. You look at his career, he's only completing a little bit over 50% of his completions, or of his passes. I want you to take a look at what Cam's stats looked like last season. And this is including the games that he was hurt in. He, last year, had a 67.9 completion percentage. That was up for all the way from the 50s, all right? This was the first year that they had changed offensive systems around Norv Turner's system, all right? So you could see that Norv Turner was starting to improve Cam Newton's game. He also threw for 3,395 yards, and so that was 14 games in to add to that. And if he hadn't gotten hurt, he probably would have thrown for 4,000 yards that year, which he does not do very often. I don't think he's done that since his rookie year. And he also threw 24 touchdowns. He did throw 13 interceptions, but then again, you look at it, after he had gotten hurt was when he threw most of his interceptions last year. And so when you look at that, if he had just stayed healthy, Cam Newton would be a star in this league. with North Turner's offense, because he completely improved Cam Newton's game to playing at career paces for Cam Newton. And so you can't tell me that Cam Newton in these situations against the Packers and against the Falcons would not be a better quarterback for this system. And so when you look at that, I believe changes are going to come in this offseason for the Panthers. I mean, if they continue to go on this track and lose games that they shouldn't be losing, Ron Rivera might get fired, because they obviously are going in the wrong direction, all right? They're going in the complete opposite direction of where they need to go. They should have kept Cam Newton for this foreseeable future, but instead it looks like they're trying to turn the corner and go on to a different quarterback and go on to Kyle Allen, who's not fit for the job. If anybody is fit for this job who's new, I would say it's either Will Grier, who is our third-round pick, who we're not paying that much because we got him in the third round, and he's got plenty of arm talent. I would love to see how he would do in this offense under North Turner's tutelage. Or we can go into the draft, and maybe, and we'll talk about this player later as far as what happened to him this weekend, but maybe you could pick up Tua even. Maybe he drops that far in the draft due to the hip injury, and maybe you can keep Will Grier or Cam Newton maybe even on for the next year until Tua's hip gets right, because I don't know if Tua's going to be able to play with his hip injury. I mean, it's still touch and go with how early this injury has happened, and so we don't know all the details yet and how his recovery is going to happen and what pace is going to happen at. But Tua could end up dropping to the Panthers, and I would love to see him play for the Panthers. And so when you look at that, those are all better options than sticking to Kyle Allen. Kyle Allen, I repeat, is not the quarterback of the future for the Panthers. And so you could discuss it in the comments like the dude in the last video did. You could discuss in the comments section if you believe that Kyle Allen is the future of the Panthers, but I can bring up multiple stats that show you in multiple game performances where he is not showing any improvement that can show you that he is a franchise quarterback. And so we can have a discussion about that, and I'm going to win it more than likely, because you cannot bring up any stats or really any game film that shows me that he can win football games without Christian McCaffrey running for crazy amounts of yards. I mean, Christian McCaffrey had 14 carries, 70 yards against the Falcons. That's not good enough for Kyle Allen to do well. Kyle Allen needs Christian McCaffrey to do well in the backfield. He needs his receivers to make plays for him, and that's just not what a franchise quarterback needs. A franchise quarterback can take you over the top with his talent, and he's just not doing that. And so I believe that they're going to end up regretting getting rid of Cam. And honestly, I just wish that if Cam moves on, I wish him the best, because this franchise has done him completely dirty, in my opinion. And so if you like this video, hit the like button. And if you're new to the channel, click the subscribe button down below. And also, if you're new to the channel, hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload or a stream. Okay, so one of the last NFL topics I want to get into is Dak. And I believe, I've been talking about it the past few weeks. I believe Dak is the franchise quarterback for the Cowboys. We just got done talking about how Kyle Allen is not the franchise quarterback. I believe that Dak is the franchise quarterback of the Cowboys, and he just continues to prove it week in and week out. You look at how he played against Detroit in a 35-27 win. His defense obviously did not show up. You could just look at the box score and look at that. I mean, they made Jeff Driscoll, a running backup quarterback, look like a star. And you really had to worry about the Cowboys going into the ending moments of the game, because if Dak hadn't completed some of the passes that he did down the stretch, Jeff Driscoll could have won that game for him, for the Detroit Lions. And so the defense is not showing up for the Cowboys. The running game, again, doesn't show up for the Cowboys. Ezekiel Elliott only runs for a little over 40 yards on plenty of carries. The offensive line just does not look to be the same, at least not in the running game. And even in pass protection, they're not doing as well as you would expect against premier opponents. But Dak, 29 of 46, 444 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, and an 82.1 QBR. Can I interest you in that? Can I interest you, the fans, in those stats? Because as a Panthers fan, I would love to have Dak to give me those stats. I mean, you look at it, he's not just throwing it to Amari. I know you could say, oh, well, he has Amari Cooper. He's a top wide receiver in the league. Amari, if you haven't been watching the Cowboys games, has been struggling with an injury. I mean, he's been injured since training camp, and so he hasn't been his usual dominant self. And so Dak Prescott, he throws for 180 of his yards to Michael Gallup, to Randall Cobb. He's getting some of his yards. You know, he's spreading the ball around. He's doing things that elite quarterbacks do. And you just look at the film. If you understand football, you can see him change protections and, you know, ID defenders, doing everything that an elite franchise veteran quarterback does. And he has elevated his game from that standpoint. And so when you look at that, I believe that Dak is definitely the franchise quarterback for the Cowboys, and they need to pay him and pay him now and pay him generously. I mean, they're trying to get him to take a hometown discount. If I'm Dak, bump that. Bump that. I'm not giving you a discount for the way that I've been playing. I've been playing like a star, and so I need to be paid $40 million, which is what the standard is for the quarterbacks nowadays. You look at Jared Goff, he's getting paid about $40 million. And Jared Goff is not playing like a star. And so when you look at that, Dak can easily make the argument to Jerry Jones in that franchise, I need to be paid in full. And so when you look at that, and you look at his season, 67.7 completion percentage, that's a career high, 3,221 yards. That's tops in the NFL. I mean, who coming into this season thought that Dak would throw for the most yards? I didn't hear anybody, including me, predicting that he was going to throw for the most yards. And part of that is because Patrick Mahomes did go out. I mean, Patrick Mahomes was completely in the lead when he was healthy, and he was playing every game. And so you can attribute it to that, but also you do have to give Dak credit. And also 21 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. That I could do, I could do with less interceptions. I would like to see him throw less picks, but he is improving from that standpoint, as he did have 0 interceptions in this game. 8.8 yards per attempt. Again, that's an important stat for me. It shows he's not dinking and dunking, or as Shannon likes to call it on Undisputed, dinking and dacking. All right. He doesn't deserve that nickname anymore because he is not dinking and dunking. 8.8 yards per attempt is showing that he's pushing the ball downfield to his receivers. Like I said, he's tops in the NFL in passing yards. And again, he's tied in second for QBR. That just goes to show you that he is playing an overall solid game and a solid season. And so you cannot tell me that the Cowboys have not found their QB of the future. And so when I look at that, everything around him is not going right. Honestly, I would, with the way that he's playing, if Lamar Jackson wasn't playing like a superstar and playing at a legendary pace, if Russell Wilson wasn't playing at an MVP pace also, I would put Dak up there. I would put him up there. But he's not doing what they're doing from a record standpoint, so he does get set back. But I definitely believe in the lower tier MVP conversation, with people like Christian McCaffrey and Deshaun Watson, I think he definitely competes with them. And he may even be ahead of Deshaun. And I love Deshaun. I'm a Clemson fan, and so I completely support Deshaun. But with the way Deshaun played last week against the Ravens and the way that Dak's been playing, he may be ahead of him in the MVP race. He might be third in the MVP race, in my opinion. And so when you look at all that, Dak, he is playing phenomenal, and I believe that he is definitely the franchise QB for the Cowboys. And so If you want to argue with me about that, just drop a comment. Drop a comment and we'll have a nice little discussion about that. And we could talk about it. And so, if you like this video, hit the like button. Also, click the subscribe button if you're new. And also, hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload or a stream. Alright, we're moving quickly through these topics because there's not anybody, again, to argue with me. I hate it. My friend's not here to debate with me. And so we're going to get into our next topic, which is the Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph incident. I do have to put in my 2 cents just real quickly about what happened in that situation. So if you didn't watch the game, it was a Thursday night game between the Browns and the Steelers. The Browns win 21-7. Pretty standard, boring Thursday night game. Nothing really happening much in the game until about 8 seconds left. Man, there's a big duel. And this man, Myles Garrett, hits Mason Rudolph in the head with a helmet. And so at this point, I believe most people know about it, but I just had to recap that in case you hadn't seen it. And so just to give my 2 cents on the situation, I believe that this situation is being handled completely wrong. You look back at Friday, they dished out the punishment. Myles Garrett is suspended indefinitely, so that means that he's suspended for the entire rest of the season, which is devastating to the Browns because the Browns could have made a push for the playoffs, which I don't believe they can do now without Myles Garrett, who is a superstar at that defensive end position. And then you look at the other people involved in the fight. Pouncey for the Steelers, he gets 3 games suspension for kicking somebody in the head and defending his quarterback, which I don't blame him for. Again, Pouncey, if you see somebody hitting your quarterback as a teammate, you are obligated to get involved in that fight and start throwing punches. So I don't blame him at all, even though I'll get into what Mason Rudolph did later. You also look at one of the Browns linemen that got into the fight, also got a 1-game suspension, and also fines were dished out to everybody. But when you look at Mason Rudolph, and I haven't heard anything of him getting punished yet, and I have a problem with that. And that's why I feel like this situation is being mishandled. Now, Myles Garrett, he took the fight way too far. I mean, he used a helmet, and that is considered a weapon, basically, when you're on the field. When you start hitting people with helmets, you're starting to hit people with weapons. I mean, that's like using a gun in a knife fight. I mean, that's just unfair. And so I get why Myles Garrett is suspended. I would have liked to see it only be for about 4 games, and I'll get into why. I believe that Mason Rudolph should be punished at least a game. He should be at least suspended for a game and at least fined thousands of dollars. I mean, this man, Mason Rudolph, if you look at it, he started the fight. You can't tell me any different. Go back and watch the tape. Myles Garrett hits him as he throws the ball. It was not late. He hit him as he threw the ball. All right. He drags him down and does not throw any of his weight on him, so I don't think it should have been penalized. But he did throw him down a little late because he thought he still had the football. I don't think that was a dirty play. I think he's just trying to make a football play. And then this man, Mason Rudolph, who played terrible, had 1 touchdown and 4 picks in the game, he gets frustrated and tries to take off Myles Garrett's helmet when they're on the ground. You look at, he's grabbing his helmet. And then later in the fight, he hits him in his manly parts, is what we'll call them, to keep it, PG. He hits him in his manly parts, and yet Mason Rudolph gets no type of punishment. And then he also escalates the fight. Once it had been separated by the Steelers lineman who was pushing Myles Garrett back, he's trying to separate them. Myles Garrett completely looked like he was diffused. It looked like the situation was over, and it looked like the situation was going to die down. All right? And instead, Mason Rudolph decides to come all the way around his offensive lineman and start to try and throw punches at Myles Garrett. And so you cannot tell me that Mason Rudolph is the victim. I watched ESPN all Friday afternoon, and I watched people literally say, word for word, Mason Rudolph is a victim. He's not a victim. He started the fight, he escalated the fight, and he just lost the fight. That's all that happened. He did not, get hurt, because he did nothing, and we shouldn't feel sorry for Mason Rudolph. He is not a victim in this situation. He just lost the fight. Plain and simple. He tried to take off Myles Garrett's helmet, and he was unsuccessful at doing that, and Myles Garrett just did the same thing back. And so when you look at it, I don't think he deserves to be absolved from any of these punishments. And, you just watch him in his press conferences. He's trying to play that victim card, saying that he's not going to, back down from a bully, I think is what he said in his press conference. Baloney. He was thinking about suing Myles Garrett. That is one of the just most feminine moves that a player has ever made. You can't start the fight and then look at the ref and throw your hands up after you get hit and you lose the fight. And then afterwards you say, "Oh, I'm going to sue." Or you might sue. He ended up not, suing. He ended up deciding against it. But it was a thought because his lawyer did come out and say it was a possibility. So he was thinking about it. He was definitely thinking about it. And so when I look at that, why is Mason Rudolph not being, why is he not being punished? Because I look at it, you can't start the fight and not get punished. You can't, people say, "Oh, these are grown men. This is the NFL." You can't look at it from the standpoint of a child and saying, "Oh, he started it and, he continued it and all that." Yeah, you can, because that's how we do it in law. When you see people get in bar fights and all that happens, nobody, they look at the situation from situation to situation, and both people are punished if both people started the fight. If both people were involved in the fight and they are both worth blame, then they both get punished. And so I believe that's what should happen. I believe that Myles Garrett is getting a little bit unfairly treated because he's getting an indefinite suspension. This could last into next season. He should be suspended for some of the games at the beginning of next season. Whereas Mason Rudolph, he's going to go scot-free. And so if you don't have a problem with that, I believe you got some problems. And, usually I like to have nice discussions in the comment section, but I don't feel like people are going to discuss this in a nice manner, because I feel like people are either on one side or the other. You either believe that Myles Garrett didn't deserve the long suspension that he got and that Mason Rudolph should be punished, or you're on the other side and you believe Mason Rudolph is a victim and he doesn't deserve any punishment at all. And so I feel like if you want to discuss it, we can discuss it in the comments, but I believe I can win that argument, because it's ridiculous that Mason Rudolph gets to start fights. And for the people that were saying that it was assault and that Myles Garrett should be locked up, that is utterly ridiculous. It's a fight, but it's not like he was trying to kill anybody. Obviously, Myles Garrett was a little bit heated in the situation, but he was never trying to kill Mason Rudolph. Let's not get it twisted. And so that's really all I got to say. I don't want to beat a dead horse and just continue to repeat what I have to say about it. I just believe that Mason Rudolph, he deserves some punishment. What Myles Garrett did was wrong. Everybody in this situation should be punished, all right? But that doesn't mean Mason Rudolph gets to get off scot-free just because he was the one who got hit in the head with a helmet. That's utterly ridiculous if you think he shouldn't be suspended at least a game. But if you like this video, hit the like button, and also, if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button, and also click the notification bell down below so you never miss an upload or a stream. Okay, so to get into some of the last topics, we're going to go into some college football. All right, the CFP, top 6 comes out tonight. It is a Tuesday night, comes out at 7 p.m. in case, you didn't know. And so we're going to go recap. I don't have any changes to what my top 6 was last week, which actually completely matched what the top 6 was last week. My top 6 matched the committee's top 6, which I thought was pretty cool because it shows that great minds, they think alike, but I'm just going to go down and recap what happened for each team. And also I'm going to talk about some potential changes I could have made and was thinking about making to my top 6, but I didn't want to jump the gun and make them yet. And so we'll start out with number 1, LSU. They go on the road and win against Ole Miss 58-37. Main thing that I'm kind of concerned with LSU is that they can't stop the run. They can't stop the run. Ole Miss rushed for over 400 yards. 400! This is Ole Miss we're talking about. This isn't a top-tier SEC team. This is a middle-of-the-pack to below-average team. And so the fact that LSU gave up that many yards is a little bit concerning. But, again, another 58 points from the LSU offense. Joe Burrow looking unstoppable. If, he's going to have to fall off a cliff to lose this Heisman. I mean, he's got it locked, in my opinion. I just don't see how he doesn't have it in the bag. And so they went over Ole Miss, and that's my main concern with them. And I'll talk about also Ohio State at number 2. They win 56-21 over Rutgers in their second game without Chase Young. Chase Young will be coming back for their key matchup against Penn State this week, and so that will be a big matchup, and that will be a fun one to see. Ohio State is they're favored over Penn State by 18 points, which I think is a little bit high. I'm not going to get in too much with a game breakdown, but I do believe that Penn State does have an opportunity to win this football game. They do have a lot of talent on the defensive side of the football, and so don't let the Minnesota game get it twisted. Penn State is still a talented football team. I think they keep it close, but I would favor Ohio State in this matchup, just not by 18 points. But my main dilemma with with my rankings and who should be ranked of who, I was about to put Ohio State ahead of LSU, but I just couldn't because LSU just has that resume. They have those 4 top-tier wins, and so you can't, when you compare the resumes, that Ohio State has to LSU, it's just, there's no comparison. And so I had to keep LSU at 1. But Ohio State continues to dominate no matter who they play. And, you can't tell me, oh, well, look who they played. I've seen a ton of Clemson fans, I'm a fellow Clemson fan too, trash-talking Ohio State and saying, well, who have they played? No, you can't say that. When you're constantly dominating your opponent, it doesn't matter who you're playing. When you find that level of consistency, it doesn't matter who you're playing. You're a top team. And they do everything consistently well. They play defense well. They rush the passer well with Chase Young coming back. They play great offense from passing the ball with Justin Fields. He threw for over 300 yards for the first time in his career against Rutgers. To go along with the fact that J.K. Dobbins is getting it done in the running game. They have a great offensive line, great wide receivers out at the wideout position. And also, they have great special teams. I mean, that covers everything. That covers every single side of the football. So you have to give credit where credit is due. Ohio State, I kept at number 2, but easily could have been number 1. Clemson, I keep at number 3, obviously. We dominated a Wake Forest team that was banged up. They didn't have their top wide receiver, and so I don't put too much credit into what Wake Forest is. But again, if you continue to dominate the opponents that are in front of you, you are a great football team. And so Clemson is definitely a top 4 team. They continue to dominate. They continue to look like they're getting back to their national championship selves, which as a Clemson fan, that makes me very happy. But at the same time, I do need to see, as going forward and going into the playoffs, how they continue to look. As when you look at some of these other teams, Ohio State and LSU, we're going to have to play our A game to compete with these cats and win against these cats. And then you look at, I got Georgia at number 4. They got a solid 21-14 win over Auburn on the road. They were up 21-0, and I was completely just blown away from what they were doing from a defensive standpoint in that game up to that point. But then they let Bo Nix, who is not a very good quarterback, come back in the second half of the fourth quarter and allowed them to score 14 points. And they were an onside kick away from being able to potentially tie that football game. And also they were a fourth down conversion from getting that game closer than it even was at the end of it, which was 21-14. So I look at it, Georgia, they're going to have their opportunities down the road. They locked up their position in the SEC championship game, and they're probably going to play LSU. So they're going to have their opportunity to show whether they should be in the playoffs. If they beat LSU, they'll make it in. If they don't, they won't. And so I definitely am satisfied from them at a defensive standpoint, but I need to see a little bit more from their offense from a consistency standpoint. You look at number 5, I still got Alabama, and this was the second one that I thought I could have switched with the team that I had below them, which is Oregon. Alabama, they won 38-7 over Mississippi State, but as you know, Tua got hurt in that game, and I think that makes a big impact on what Alabama will do going forward. You see they were up 35-7 with Tua. They only scored 3 points with Mac Jones, and so we'll see if Mac Jones can improve. But for right now, I got Alabama locked at number 5, even though I could have easily put them at 6 as Oregon won 34-6 over Arizona. And Oregon continues to look like a great, solid team. And they have the road ahead of, they have their path laid out in front of them. Get to the Pac-12 championship, continuing to win your games with a 1 loss on your resume, and beat Utah. That's how you get in. I believe if Georgia loses and Alabama with their current state, I'd put Oregon in ahead of them in that final week. I didn't put them ahead of them now because I do believe you do have to look at what Alabama has done up to this point, and you can't project what they're going to look like with Mac Jones. And so that's just the way the committee runs it, and I believe that's how I run my rankings. And so I'm going to keep Oregon at 6 because I'm not going to project what Alabama's going to look like, but I do believe Oregon will eventually jump over them if they win the Pac-12 championship so that they can make it into the playoffs. And so that's my recap. I'm keeping the same, like I said, the same exact top 6 as I had last week, and it's the same exact 6 as what the committee had. And that's exactly what I think the committee will do tonight. I don't think there's going to be a lot of parity, and so I don't think, honestly, you have to tune into the rankings on ESPN, but I'm going to because I'm just a big college football fan. And so if you like this video, hit the like button down below, and also click the subscribe button if you're new, and also hit the notification bell so that you never miss an upload or a stream. Okay, and so my last topic I'm going to get into should Tua have been playing while up 35-7 against Mississippi State? Because obviously, at this point, if you're a college football fan, you have heard that Tua is out for the season with a dislocated hip. And so you look at it, I just don't think he should have been playing while up 35-7. I mean, you can argue even should he have been playing at all. And I don't think I'm going to argue against that. I mean, he was cleared to play. Sometimes training staffs will clear people who are not quite ready to play, which happens a lot. It happened to me when I played in high school, and I'm not trying to compare myself to Tua. In no way was I ever even close to being that good. But that's what happened to me. I hurt my knee one time, and I got cleared early to play, even though I wasn't quite ready. And so that could be a possibility. But at the same time, I believe that Nick Saban wouldn't directly go out and start him if he wasn't completely, ready to play the football game. I'm not going to question whether he should have played the football game. But what I will question is why is he in with 2 minutes left while up 35-7? You do not need him. I mean, Nick Saban tried to argue that, we needed him to get some practice in a 2-minute drill just to give him some extra reps. Baloney, man. Baloney. He has been starting for you for 2 years now. Almost 2 years. If he hasn't gotten used to playing in a 2-minute drill, then I don't know if he's ever going to be ready. And so I just think that's baloney. I think that I can't confirm this, and I'm not going to harp on Saban, but I do think he was going for some style points. He's trying to get his team back in the conversation for the college football playoff because he wants to make it. I mean, they have always been in the college football playoff for as long as it's existed. And so you look at the way Nick Saban has done in the past in 2017, he went around on championships Saturday, and he completely went around and campaigned for his team to make the playoffs. And so I believe he was trying to get an extra touchdown so that he could make the argument come championship Saturday that he has the style points to get into the playoff. But I can't confirm that, so I won't completely blast him for that. But I feel like coaches, their number one responsibility is to do what is right by the player. You have to do what is right by the player, and you have to keep them safe and keep them from hurting themselves. You have to keep them protected from themselves, because I am sure that Tua wanted to go back in that football game. Tua is a competitor. Most of us football players in that situation, if we're competitors, we're going to go back in that football game because we just love playing football. But you have to, as a coach, knowing that Tua is hurt and knowing that anything could happen in this situation, anything could happen, you have to think and err on the side of caution and say, you know what, Tua, you're done. I don't care that you want to go back in. We're up 35-7. The game is over. Mississippi State is not coming back. All right? There's no point in you having him in the game. So you just got to say, Tua, I know you want to play, but I'm protecting you from yourself. So you got to sit down on the bench. You're done. And he didn't. And you see what happens. He didn't hurt what he had hurt before. It wasn't his ankle, obviously, and so some people are arguing, well, he didn't hurt what he had hurt before, so that just proves that he was supposed to be in the game at that point, and this just was a freak accident. But what really happened was he was rolling out of the pocket, and he couldn't get away from a defender that, if he hadn't been hurt, he would have been able to get away from. He was running really, really slow because he was hurt. His ankle was still not exactly 100%, and so he couldn't get away from him. He gets brought down, and he gets hurt, and he hurts his hip, and he's out for the year. And so you have to always err on the side of caution, especially when you're up. Now, if it were a tight game, sure, you keep him in the game because you got to make plays. You got to win that football game. But you're up 35-7. The game is over. I don't care what anybody says. Alabama is not allowing Mississippi State to come back if Tua gets taken out in that situation. And a perfect example of that was they didn't allow Mississippi State to come back in the second half. They didn't score a single point in the second half. Mississippi State did. So Alabama was still just as good defensively as they were in the first half as, going through the game. And so you have to just err on the side of caution, and you have to protect your players. I said the same thing, and I got on Steve Kerr during the summer for putting Kevin Durant out there with the Warriors. He knew that Kevin Durant was not 100%, and he still put him out there because he wanted to win a basketball game. But it ended up hurting Kevin Durant, as Kevin Durant is still out for the rest of the year. And so it's the same situation with Tua. You have to protect your players as a coach. That is your number one responsibility. It's not to win football games. It's to keep your players safe because they're human beings. They aren't items. All right? Players constantly get treated by fans like they are items and like they're just not going to break. We are human beings. Football players, that we are human beings. I played football, and so I kind of feel for Tua because I got hurt before too, and coaches were pushing me to come back too when I wasn't ready, and I did come back before I was supposed to, but they were trying to get me to come in a week after I tore my MCL. They were trying to get me to play in a playoff game after I had just torn my MCL, so I kind of have a little experience with what it is like. You can't do that with players. They're human beings. You can't treat us like we are items. All right. And so you have to err on the side of caution. I don't mean to repeat myself constantly, but I just have to drill into people's heads that that's the number one responsibility of a coach, is not to selfishly go to win games. And so Tua's hurt. We'll see how Alabama plays down the stretch, but man, is this a big loss for not only Alabama, but for Tua, as Tua's probably going to drop in the draft. He could have been the number one pick in the draft. If you keep up with the NFL, you know the big difference between first pick money and lower first round and maybe even second or third round draft pick money. And so he's costed him millions of dollars. You know, he could be out for even next season with this hip injury, depending on how it heals. And so I feel for Tua. Prayers out to Tua. I hope he heals really quickly. You know, I'm a Clemson fan, and, you know, we've had our beef with Alabama before, but, you know, as a football fan, I just hate to see it because Tua is a really talented player. And so I pray for him and his family. And I just really hope that he recovers fully and recovers, you know, speedy. And so that's all I have to say about the Alabama situation. So if you like this video, hit the like button. And also, if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button down below. And also hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload or a stream. And so that's all I had to talk about with this podcast. I just wanted to get some thoughts out quickly on what happened over the weekend. And so hopefully Hassan will be back. I know he makes the show that much more entertaining, going back and forth with me, but unfortunately he wasn't able to make it this time, and so I had to run this one solo. And so hopefully you still enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing this by myself. I felt like it was good practice for me, as I am trying to go into sports communications. And so I'm just trying to get practice with this podcast. That's the whole point of this. And so if you tuned in, I really appreciate it. Again, you know, I appreciate all the love and support that I can get. And so we're just, you know, we're trying to build this podcast, and, you know, hopefully I can make it in this business. You know, I really want to make it. You know, I have a drive to do well. So all your love and support would be much appreciated. So I'm going to sign out. Hopefully y'all have a wonderful day. I am John West, aka Dead Op, and I will see y'all later. Peace.